Good afternoon. Happy Easter. Christ is risen. He is risen indeed. Hallelujah. I'm recording this video in my parents' home in Columbia, Tennessee. This week I'm here helping my dad as my mom transitions to either assisted living or memory care as her Alzheimer's has progressed. I'm grateful that it worked well for me to be here right during this eventful week for them. Somehow I think our Lord arranged the timing. We had a wonderful Holy Week with lots of people at our Maundy, Thursday, Good Friday, and Easter services. We had 10 students who received their first communion during Holy Week. It was fun to have our sunrise service with Pastor Randy and others from St. James, including a couple of trumpeters. Ella Croning sang at both of our regular Easter services. If you couldn't join us for any of those worship events, you can watch them on our church's YouTube page. As a congregation, we're reading through the Bible using the One Year Chronological Reading Plan. This past week, we finished the book of Joshua and started the book of Judges. After the Lord gave the people rest from their enemies in the Promised Land, they settled in the towns that God had given them, east and west of the Jordan River. Joshua was getting old, so he gave some final instructions to the people, just as Moses had. He reminded them of how God had rescued them from Egypt and led them through the wilderness. God then defeated their enemies for them so that he could give them his good land. Joshua called the people to be faithful to the Lord, putting away all their idols and refusing to worship the gods of the people around them. He said to them, "Choose this day whom you will serve, either the Lord or the gods of your ancestors. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." The people all replied that they too would worship the Lord alone. Joshua told them, "You cannot worship the Lord. He is a jealous God and will not tolerate anyone who abandons him and worships other gods." But the people insisted that they too would serve the Lord. So Joshua set up a large memorial stone as a witness against them. The tribes who received land east of the Jordan as their inheritance nearly started a civil war when they set up a large altar on their land. But when the other tribes confronted them, the eastern tribes said that it was only a memorial altar to remind all the Israelites that those on the east side of the Jordan would also worship the one true God, only in his sanctuary. The Israelites were faithful to God as long as Joshua and the other elders who had seen all that God had done for them remained alive. But after they died, the people began to stray. The book of Judges describes the cycle that the Israelites got themselves into. When things were going well for them, they got comfortable and started acting like the people around them. They intermarried with other nations and began worshiping their gods as well. God then let them experience the consequences of their actions. Their enemies rose up against them, harassed them, and sometimes enslaved them. When the Israelites came to their senses and cried out to the Lord, he sent a judge to deliver them, like Gideon, Deborah, and Samson. These were not judges in a courtroom, but military leaders who gave the Israelites victory over their enemies. As long as the judge was alive, the Israelites obeyed the Lord and had rest from their enemies. But when the judge died, they went back to their old rebellious ways. Again and again. At the end of the book, the author concludes by saying that there was no king in Israel in those days, and everyone did as they saw fit. The book of Joshua points to Jesus because they share the same name in Hebrew. The book of Judges points to Jesus as well, because Jesus is far better than any of those leaders. Rather than conquering his enemies with violence, Jesus let his enemies do their worst to him. He took all of our sin and violence and suffering upon himself. God vindicated Jesus by raising him from the dead, showing him to be the true Messiah and King who takes away the sins of the world and makes all things new. That's what our celebrations in Holy Week were all about. In the description of this video, I'll give you a link to the Bible Project's video on the book of Judges. Have a great rest of the week. This weekend, Sunday school will resume, and Deacon Doug will preach and lead worship. Our adult class on the book of Genesis will resume on April 14th. Have a great week. See you soon.